Why do we sometimes call Native Americans Indians?
The term Indian, in reference to the original inhabitants of the American continent, is said to derive from Christopher Columbus, a 15th-century boat person. Some say he used the term because he was convinced he had arrived in the Indies.
Christopher Columbus first landed on the Bahamas and he called Indians the people he saw there. He stepped on other islands of the Caribbean convinced he was in India. So, in short, the confusion arose when Christopher called the folks who live in the Americas Indians.
Columbus never set foot in North America. During 4 separate trips that started with the one in 1492, Columbus landed on various Caribbean islands that are now the Bahamas, as well as the island later called Hispaniola. So, why were North America natives called Indian?
Long after its first use in the New World, the early British and American empires needed a word to collectively describe the first people, and Indian, despite its confused origins, was that word.
Prester John had been considered the ruler of India since the legend's beginnings, but India was a vague concept to the medieval Europeans. Writers often spoke of the 3 Indias, lacking any real knowledge of the Indian Ocean. Was North America believed to be one of 3 Indias?
Within the United States, the reservations number more than 300. Within and without those areas of special sovereignty, there are more than 500 federally recognized tribes, each with a different name. To win the minds of the majority, to get laws securing sovereignty, hundreds of different names for different groups is not helpful. A collective name, one clear in the minds of the majority, was needed, a name useful for unity. In the time of civil rights, American Indians, shortened to Indians, was, despite its confused origins, that name.
The East India Company was an English, and later British, joint stock company founded in 1600. The United East India Company was a multinational corporation founded by a government-directed consolidation of several rival Dutch trading companies. The French East India Company was a colonial commercial enterprise, founded on the 1st of September, 1664. East Indiaman was a general name for any sailing ship operating under charter or license to any of the East India trading companies of the major European trading powers of the 17th through the 19th centuries. The term is used to refer to vessels belonging to the Austrian, Danish, Dutch, English, French, Portuguese, or Swedish companies. The Dutch West India Company was a chartered company of Dutch merchants as well as foreign investors. Were people living under the rulership of the India companies called Indian? And if so, did this include North American natives?
On reservations, the word Indian is still used without hesitation or negative connotation, used as identity, not universally, but near it. You, like me, may be surprised to hear that, given the word's confused origins, but words are what we make them, and Indians have made the word theirs. For at least 300 years, Indian has meant the first people in this part of the world, separated at first, but thrust into a shared history.
Why were North American natives called Indian?
The tribal governments and the United States government use Indian. The Bureau of Indian Affairs, staffed by Indians, which mediates between the two governments, also uses Indian. To call governments and departments and laws by names other than what they are would be pointlessly confusing. At the time of writing, Indian is used by Indians on Indian reservations to describe themselves. The word is clear in geography and history, limited to the first people of what is now the continental United States.
Indians couldn't vote. Negroes could vote, but not an Indian. I consider myself a Narragansett, not a black.
The only way the Narragansetts could participate in elections was by identifying themselves as African Americans.
During the time of their creation, the images of the American Indians are depicted as people who carried so-called Negroid facial features.
That to me is a Negro face that has all the features that you associate with a Negroid face. It doesn't say anything about it being a Mongoloid.
When I was reading to prepare for this interview, I was quite surprised to see you use the word Aborigines talking about African Americans.
The only way the Narragansetts could participate in elections was by identifying themselves as African Americans.
The history of cigar store carved Indians.
Right.
And they weren't all Indians.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
Right, they weren't all Indians.
Why were North American natives called Indian?
Now, as for Native American, while preferred by some, there exists in others a strong dislike and resentment of the name. The word Native American can include everyone from the top to bottom of 2 continents, a vast number of different cultures and current-day goals and concerns. The histories of North, Central, and South America are as divergent as the histories of Asia, Europe, and Africa.
Christopher Columbus first landed on the Bahamas and he called Indians the people he saw there. He stepped on other islands of the Caribbean convinced he was in India. When he made it to Cuba, he thought he was in Japan.
Say what, my brother? Now, wait a minute.